Hi, welcome to the teacher walkthrough TinkerCAD video. First, once you log in, you are going to click on Create a New Design. This will give you a blank working surface. This surface here is your work plane, but we don't want it in millimeters. We'd like to have it in inches. When you're working on your templates, remember, we have a specific width and height. That's going to be 3.5 by 2. So if I enter 3.5 by 2, you'll see I have a nice rectangular work plane. This is the limit of the space you may print on. Now, we need to create a surface on that plane for you to put your template on. Think of it as the paper you're about to draw on. You're going to click on the cube and place it in the corner of your workspace. Now you'll notice if I enter the numbers by hand by clicking on the sizes, I need to be careful to put my 2 by 3.5 in the right spaces. Now it's the same size as my work plane. I want it to be a lot shorter though. When we're printing today over here, it's going to tell you how tall or how high this work plane is. We only want this to be 1/8 of an inch at the most. You could also do 1/16 of an inch. Now unfortunately this program won't let you put in fractions, so you have to put in decimal places for your fractions. So make sure you go in here and you make it 0.05. And if you're careful with your mouse, if it has a scroll button, you can scroll in and out for your zoom on here to check out your work plane. You can always click on this arrow to pull it up off the surface for future reference, but we don't want to do that today. We want to keep it flat on that work plane where it started. So be careful about pulling this button the wrong direction. If you pull the square, it'll make your work plane a little bit thicker. So we're going to go ahead and pull it up a little bit so it's a little thicker. This box up here will show you the different sides of your three-dimensional surface. It'll show you all 4 sides. It'll show you the top, it'll show you the bottom. When you want to go back to the original view, you just click on Home. If you don't have a scroll button on your mouse, you can also use the plus and minus buttons for zooming in and out. You can change the color of your work surface at any time by making sure it's highlighted and then changing it up here in the color palette. The color you make it in here has absolutely nothing to do with the color it prints out in the printer. It's just showing you your different spaces. Now if I want to begin making my texture plate, I need to make sure I add another work plane on top of the shape I just put on here. Remember I put a form on here with this cube? I need to make sure I put a work plane on top of there for my new shapes to stick to. Think of it like the glue that holds your project together. So I am going to choose to make a texture plate with hearts on it. I want to be careful I don't accidentally grab this down here, but I notice it seems like it's a little bit off on the corners. It's not quite on my work surface anymore. If I look over here, I can see my numbers are moving, and those should be 0 and 0 when I'm working with this project. So I want to go up here and make sure it's just in the corners. I'm going to go back over here. Now, my heart is going to be the same as the cube that I just did. I don't want it to be super high. If kids are using these as rubbing plates where they put the paper on top and then they do a crayon over it, if they're really high and bumpy, it's going to tear the paper. I want to keep them really shallow, so that 1/8 of an inch again. And then I want multiple hearts on this surface. So I'm going to shrink it down a little bit to a smaller size, just like you would in cropping photos and adjusting photos. So if you already have something on the surface and you want to make an exact duplicate of it up here, you click on the duplicate button and it'll blink. You won't notice anything until you drag and drop that exact duplicate next to it. If you ever don't like an idea, you can always undo the move or undo the copy. Likewise, you can always throw something in the trash. Now, I want to be careful when I'm doing this that all my hearts are the exact same shape and size. So I'm going to do a copy paste. When I'm doing that on here, I can click on the object, and then at the top of my screen, I can click on the drop-down menu that's the copy button and paste. So I can do that for the first row, and then instead of doing it 1 by 1, if I'm going to make a repeating pattern, I'm going to move these here so they're a little bit more evenly spaced from each other. I'm going to click on all 3 and I'm going to hold the shift button down so it gets all 3, and then I'm going to copy and paste those again. And now I'm going to do all 6 of them and copy and paste and drag them where I want them to be. This is much faster than trying to do 15 different individual hearts and making sure they all line up. I can line them up a lot faster this way and copy and paste them. So now I have a texture plate really formed. If I look, my edges aren't quite the same, but there's a big gap between the second to last row and the last column. So I'm going to highlight all those, and I'm going to move them over just a little bit. Just drag it. I'm going to try and get the same distance on all sides, all the way around. If you look, it's just about a square's width from the edge. So all of these are more or less lined up. Now, they're not perfect. If you want yours to be perfect, you can use the grid, but mine are close enough. Now, I am going to turn this to all the sides, and I want to check and make sure those hearts are on the work plane. I want to make sure they're not floating above it, because that can happen if you're not careful. If they're floating above the work plane or into the work plane, they won't print correctly. So you always want to double check all the way around. Now that I have this plate done, I'm going to go up to the top, and I'm going to export this or save it or share it, depending on what we're going to do in class. And you want to export everything that's in there. We're at that level right now. And when I export it, I want to make sure that I'm sending it to my desktop someplace. Once you finish designing your template, you need to share it with me so that I can go in and print it. You're going to come up here to the upper right-hand corner and click the Share button. You're going to invite people. Now, you can't invite directly from here. That's a privacy violation for our school. So what you need to do is highlight and copy this link. So it's going to copy it to your clipboard. Then you need to go into your email account and you're going to email it to me. So to send me the email of that, you're going to open a new tab and go into your Gmail account, and you're going to compose mail, and you're going to want to send it to me. So it's Kristin, CHRISTIN.Congdon at Minnetonka, so MTKA.org. The other email you could always send it to is my school email address, which is Kristin.Congdon at MinnetonkaSchools.org. In the subject line, you're going to put 3D texture plate and your last name, like that. Okay. And then down below, you're going to paste that link. So Command or Control V will put that link in there. And then you can just hit return, and you're going to type your full name and what the hardest part of this project was for you. And for me, when I was learning TinkerCAD, the hardest thing for me to use and remember was adding the extra work plane grid to the new layer of the project. I always forgot it, and I couldn't figure out why my forms kept sinking into my base or my paper level on there. And that's why, because I didn't remember to add a new work plane grid. After that, all you have to do is click send, and it will be off and away, and you can see it's almost instant. So if I click, so then when I go and I check my school email in Outlook, I can see that that one is in there. And when I click on it, it will show me in here, here is the link that you shared with me, and I can click on that link. And when I click on that link, it takes me directly to your file where I can take a look at it and make sure it's ready for me to export in the file format that I need to print it on the 3D printer. Once I receive your file and I check over it, I'll open the 3D printing software, and I'm going to export that file into a format that the printer can read. I'll load it up to the 3D printer, just like this. And then once it's in that 3D printer model, I can go through and check to make sure there aren't any arrows. I can zoom in, I can look to make sure everything's attached, I can ask it if it needs any additional supports. At this point, your texture plate should not need additional support. I'll check through every layer the printer is going to print. I'll start at the bottom, just like the printer would, and it'll build it up like this. And I can check to make sure everything's there. And then I can click print. After I click print and send it to the printer, I have the option of pulling up a live camera view on my desktop that I can put up on the smartboard when we're not using it, and you can actually watch the printer warm up and get ready to print your item. If we look at a conversion of Celsius to Fahrenheit, you'll notice it's at 200 degrees Celsius, which already sounds hot, but if we convert that to Fahrenheit, 392 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like my super hot glue gun that I use for you guys. Now you'll notice once it heats up to that certain amount, it will start printing on the 3D printer. It has to lay a base first, so it's going to be an extra tiny, super skinny piece of plastic that you will peel off of your toy once it's finished printing. If your toy is more three-dimensional than a texture plate, we will also add supports that will peel off of that after it's finished. This may necessitate you using some fine grit sandpaper to smooth it out. You'll notice it starts with the edges of that texture plate that we already defined, and then it goes through and it starts filling them in. You'll notice the top of the screen tells you that this is a 2-hour and 27-minute print time. That's how long it will take this machine to print each and every one of your designs. So you can imagine it's very important to get those in on time. Once it's finished, I can peel it off the magnetic backing, which just sticks itself to that metal plate, and I pull off the original start line here. And remember, this, I have to push this all the way back in, just like the instructions are telling me to. And you'll see that your texture plate is fully printed. It has some natural texture. Here's that extra backing I said you're going to have to peel off of it. And you just gently pull the two apart from each other. You might want to go all the way around the edge to make sure it doesn't accidentally break your plate. But you'll just peel it off and your texture plate's finished. You can see all of the different print lines and marks. You can look at it all around, way around the edges just like you did before. Great job!